I'm going to be going over a few selected files and segments of code and digging into exactly why they're so shit and how they can be improved. So what's probably the ugliest file in the entire project is going to be the art file, right? Which is it's called art.cc, but it's essentially just a long file filled with a bunch of ASCII art to be displayed in text mode, right? And it has the cube, the 3D cube in the splash screen as one giant, if you've seen the video then you knew, but it's one giant switch statement that is 169 cases, or 170 cases long, of different frames of a 3D ASCII cube, right? And this is something I don't really intend on changing anytime soon. I made it it was one of the first things I did after following the tutorial, along with creating a basic command line, right? A tutorial for making a basic bare bones operating system. And I don't really have, at least at that low of a level of development, you don't have access to common math functions or any other libraries that allow you to easily make basic 3D transformations like that. And also, I really just didn't want to have to actually render in real time on a splash screen a 3D object. It's kind of weird to be doing something that relatively intensive when it's just the first, just after initialization. I mean, regardless, it's not really something I see worth improving unless I want to decrease the file size. I like the cube as it is, and I don't really want to change it for anything. A very common theme throughout this entire thing is that a lot of the decisions I made to do certain things in the project were kind of done in the laziest way possible. Since I try to get a video every single month, and I'm also just a generally lazy person, so I'll sort of half-ass something and I'll plan on improving it later down the line, before release, or in the next month or so, next few weeks. And because of that, there's a lot of half-baked solutions and things that aren't implemented as efficiently or as cleanly as they could be. So a lot of the problems in this code base stem from that, or they stem from testing something out initially and then just expanding upon that test code, but not really structuring it around something more clean and proper, which is something I'll go into next. But some people might say oh, you could always take more time to because it's not really a lack of free time, it's more so just if I don't put a hard time limit on things, then I'm not really going to end up doing anything, or at least I won't. It'll be much less consistent updates and stuff, which makes it less, I guess, less interesting, probably less fun as a viewer as well. So anyways, another file I wanted to look at was specifically the ofs.cc file, or the file system file that defines everything related to the file system of the operating system. So one thing that you'll notice a lot in these functions is that they all initialize a ATA, Advanced Technology Attachment object, that is then used to read or write to a certain sector, right? And this is just really stupid and inefficient. It's not it doesn't have a terrible impact on performance, but it can be made a lot more clean if this was because usually this entire project is object oriented based. Everything is a class and inherits from some other class to make things easier, so everything has access to all the proper resources and pieces of code that it needs to have access to, right? But the file system was made so it was just a series of different functions that can be accessed as long as you that can be executed as long as you provide the proper arguments and header file, right? And because of that, it has to initialize an object every single time because it's not inheriting from the object itself, so it can't read something itself and then use that data for its own purposes, which is just really easily fixable. You don't even have to do that. You can just make it so that the advanced technology attachment object, which is, a hard drive driver, a hard disk driver, is either passed to it to the function directly or is easily accessible by it through like a pointer or something, through you know, some other like data structure that I could fit like because you know, only like two really main structures of code need to have access to the hard disk as like an object, which is the command line and the desktop, right? As long as everything is passed through there, then you're pretty much good to go. And also, I might do this, like a lot of the stuff I'm talking about will probably be fixed, or I tend to fix in like one big update or time when I see fit, where I can just go through everything and, you know, clean up the code base and just make things more efficient, easier, reduce file size, and just like reorganize everything to be just generally cleaner, right? And I'll probably do part of that before 2.0 releases, but I'll probably do most of it after it releases, right? One of the main things that I might implement, that I'm not entirely sure if I'll implement before 2.0 during the time of this recording, but it's like an actual file system map, like a map of the file system in memory that is initialized on startup, that can be used throughout the runtime of the operating system you know, access certain information for different purposes, right? Like how many files are currently allocated, what you know, when was the last time a file was updated or whatever the fuck, right? I mean, stuff like that is, you know, you don't want to compute like a bunch of stuff that is already known. Like, if you boot up the operating system, you don't write any files, you don't read any files, you don't touch anything, like the file system is left completely as it was before it was booted up, then there's no reason to, like, you know, initialize the same data or collect the same data over and over and over again when nothing has changed. You could initialize a map of the file system on boot up. Every single change to the file system, whether that's a new file being allocated, a new file being deleted, or something being expanded, or something being added to the table, all that stuff can be written to the map in memory, along with actually like affecting the hard disk itself, so that the map is, you know, synchronized with the relevant data on the hard disk, and you could use it to access information or use that information for useful purposes without having to access the actual driver itself, you know, and it could just all stay within the CPU and memory, you know, between that bus. It doesn't have to, you know, access the hard disk itself physically. In that case, it'll be a lot more efficient that way, and even that, it's not like terribly hard to do. It's just going to be kind of annoying to connect all the parts together, and it's definitely something I intend on doing in the future though. But that pretty much ends like the file system portion of things for now. Another thing I wanted to look at was the kernel.cc file, which is the main file where the actual function, the kernel main function, is defined, and it's used to actually load the kernel into memory and initialize the operating system itself. So this main function is where pretty much everything happens. This first print statement is what you see first when you know, you successfully boot the operating system. It initializes, interrupts, drivers, creates a bunch of different objects that can be used for like the command line desktop later on. It activates interrupts, it makes a beep, it prints the cube, it waits for a key input, and then it enters a loop for the command line text mode. You break that loop, initializes the desktop, and then enters the main loop for the desktop, right? And from there, you know, all the drivers are loaded, everything is set in place so that you could use the operating system as normal, defined throughout the rest of the project, right? And, you know, that's not the main part of this file that I really have a problem with. The main part of this file is like the other 800 lines of 900 lines of code that is just like a bunch of miscellaneous bullshit, right? This is just like, if I wanted to define a function that I didn't feel like creating a file for, I didn't feel like, you know, organizing myself, then I'd probably just define it in kernel.cc, then define the header and wherever I want to like use it in, and then just use it there. Like that's how I like use a lot of, like if you look at the command line file, that's where like a lot of that's what I do a lot. I just define like the header and then I just use it from there. But I don't really have any problem. It's more like the main problem is just like the organization itself. You have like a bunch of print functions for mostly the text mode. You also have like a bunch of things related to like strings, a bunch of things related to commands, right, and string manipulation when it comes to the command line. a class for the text mode, which that can more or less stay there. But you also have things like rebooting the operating system, reading and writing from memory, the main sleep function, right? Random number generator, like a bunch of like miscellaneous bullshit, right? Like a lot of this can just be defined in like a string or like a string or print file for that type of stuff. And then maybe another file for like miscellaneous stuff or whatever, right? But like it's really like a big eyesore for anybody who wants to look at it, you know. The same sort of problem also extends to the CLI.cc file, which is the main source file for the command line, right? It defines all the commands and how they're initialized and the actual command line interpreter itself. And it suffers from the same problem that there's a bunch of related or unrelated functions that, I mean, they're all commands that are being called from the command line. But they could be way better organized, especially considering how large this file in particular is growing. I just realized I left a troubleshooting like comment on here that I pushed into like the actual repository. But yeah, that's kind of embarrassing, but yeah, it suffers from the same problem. It's just like an organization problem in general, where it's just like growing way too large, especially this Ayumi script, the scripting part of it that could be put in its own file, or a lot of it can at least be defined in its own file, right? Since the actual script file itself is very small and has like a basic interpreter for like reading from a file and executing them through the command line. So yeah, it's mainly just like an organization problem and connecting different parts together in a way that's cleaner and just overall neater and easier to navigate, right? Another thing that more so just has to do with file size is the pixelart.h file, which is a header file that defines a bunch of pixel art used throughout the operating system. Now usually how you like make art or make like different graphical icons and stuff like that is you would most of it would be included in like actual files that are then like installed on the disk itself, and they're used like they're taken from the disk and used within the programs, right? Loaded into memory and used in the programs, but I just don't really like I don't want like a bunch of different, especially with how my file system is, I don't like want a bunch of different stuff. I want to have as few files for that purpose, you know, as possible. I want the hard disk to be as free as possible for the user to do, like, define whatever programs or customization or images or whatever they want, right? Also, because I don't have like directories, that's not how my file system works. Like if you watch the video I'm about to put out, which I believe this is coming after, then you'll understand like how tags work and stuff like that, right? It's just the main organizational tool in the file system. But I don't plan on like migrating all my like graphical art to the hard disk, but I do plan on cleaning it up a bit so that well, first of all, just reducing the file size, because you know it doesn't really need to be defined in hexadecimal numbers like this. It could just be like a lot of this could just be like, you know, decimal numbers and trimmed down a lot more. The main thing is like a lot of these can be easily compressed and then uncompressed and loaded into memory when like a desktop is initialized, for example, right? And that'll be like a much easier way to reduce these file size for all these pieces of pixel art, right? Apart from that, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to get to for now. I mean, there's a bunch of stuff related to just like messy class members and data variables and things like that that could be more easily like, or like there's a bunch of like bool statements that could be organized in like a single integer and just used for like, you know, which bits are set to determine which conditions should be used and things like that. But once again, that's a little bit too much effort for just you know, getting something out there, working, I guess, prototype out there as quickly as possible. I'll probably like try to improve all these things in the future in like maybe a main video where I just go over, like maybe like after 2.0 is released, where I just go over a bunch of bugs or just a bunch of organizational issues and clean up everything and make it more nice and organized, right? Nice and clean. But for now, I think that's pretty much just going to be it.